Hello, everybody. So what we're going to be doing in this video is as many exercises from zyBooks as possible. So this is lecture 2 for week 3. So yeah, let's go ahead and jump into it. So we'll take a look at, I guess we'll take a look at what we have in week 2. I'll follow this link over here, but then we'll probably switch to week 3. Yeah, let's click here. Yeah, week 3. All right, so there are a lot of exercises in here. This video is probably not going to be like an hour long. It's probably going to be like more like 40 minutes long or something. So let's take a look at it. So we'll jump into, I think 3.2 is the first place where we have exercises. And we've already learned about variables in the previous lecture. So we've learned about integer variables and so on, how to declare them and how to do things with them. So I'm not going to go over all of these exercises here. We'll jump down to the challenge activities, of which I've done some already, and we'll start them and we'll take a look. So in this activity, 3.2.1, what we're doing is predicting the output of a program. So you're supposed to be at this point starting to understand how these variables are working and how the system.out print works and so on. So the first two lines here inside the main, int x and y, declare integer variables, okay, x and y. The next two lines, x equals 7, y equals 4, assigns x and y values. So now x will store a 7, y will store a 4. And then the last line of our program here, system.out x, a space, and y. So we're printing three separate things here. We're printing the variable x, not the letter x, right? The variable x. We know that because there's no quotes around it. Then we're printing a space, which we know it's a space because we have quotes and then a space and then quotes again. So there's a space inside the quotes. And then we're printing the y, which is the variable y because there's no quotes around it. Now, those three things cannot just be written side by side. You have to write the first thing, x, and then a plus to tell it we want to print something else, and then the space in the quotes, and then another plus to tell it we're printing something else, and then finally the y. So we're printing x space y. That's what it says here. And so when we print it, we're printing x. The variable x contains a 7. Then we print a space. Then we're printing the variable y, which is a 4. This is print, not print line, which means we do not press enter, right? If I press enter over here, it'll go down to the next line, but that's not what we want. And that's it. So once we have it typed out, we hit check and we get it right. Okay, so that's what we're doing here. Let's jump to number 3. And let's look at this. So it's important to understand that when you have variables like this, where you have x equals 5, y equals 2, x equals 9, that lines are processed in order. So if I go over here to Visual Studio Code, this is just so I can type. This is just a text editor, basically, so don't get too excited about what's here. So what's happening is when you run these first two lines here, int x and y, it's basically creating an integer x and an integer y, but so far they have nothing inside them. Okay, so we just have a blank x and a blank y. And then when we run these three lines, it runs them in order. So the first thing it does is x equals 5. So that puts a 5 into x. And then the next line, y equals 2, that will put a y, or sorry, 2 into variable y. And then the third thing is x equals 9. Well, that's going to go back up to the x equals 5 and just change it to a 9. Wow. I definitely hit a wrong button here. How can I close this? Yeah, so x equals 9 was the last thing we did. So x equals 9. So these are the current values here. X equals 9, y equals 2. The original x equals 5 is going to be lost because we updated the value of x. Um, Having done that, you look down at the bottom and it says system.out.print x space y. So just like the previous one, we're going to print out x and y with a space between them. So 9 and 2. So we print 9 space 2. And then we can check it. And of course, we got it right. So let's jump to number 5 and do another one. So same sort of thing happening here. Maybe let's try to get it like this so we can see two things at once. Um, so on this one, int x and y again. So we're starting out with a blank x and a blank y. Then we do y equals 7. So that puts a 7 into y. And then we have x equals y plus 3. Now you need to understand how this works. The right-hand side is going to be evaluated. So the part that I've just highlighted, y plus 3, that is going to be evaluated and we're going to get a number there. So since y is 7, right, from the previous line, if y is 7, y plus 3 is going to be 7 plus 3. So 7 plus 3 is 10, and 10 will be stored in the variable x. So you go up here, put in a 10. And so these are the values that you're going to have. X equals 10 and y equals 7. And then it prints out x, a space, and a y. So you end up with x, which is 10, a space, and the y, which is 7. Okay, so you can have math and you need to understand how the assignment works. Okay, so we did 1 and 3 and 5 here. That's probably good for that exercise. So then let's move on to the next one. So this is 3.2.2. So I guess we don't need this, so we can make this bigger. And we can do it. Okay, we'll skip to harder exercises soon, but let's just do this one because we're here. Now, the important thing about the exercises where you're writing code is that, make sure you pay attention to what they say to do because they already are going to do some of it for you, right? So a lot of the program is written. So you just need to read what your job is, basically. Now on this one, I don't know how important that is, but what's it say? Write a statement that assigns num coins with num nickels plus num nines, num dimes. Okay, so we come down here to where we can type. We can only type in the lines that are white. The grayed out ones are not editable. So I'll erase this. You don't have to. And when it says assigns num coins with, right? When they say this phrase, assigns num coins with, they mean num coins equals. That's how you assign num coins a value. Now, what value? Well, they say num nickels plus num dimes. Well, I could type that, but I could also just copy it and then paste it. And num coins equals num nickels plus num dimes. And then at the end, we need to make sure we don't forget the semicolon, which we need at the end of all of our statements. Having done that, I should be able to click run and we should just get it right. And we do. And you can look down here and see that they ran it twice and we got the correct values. Initializing variables. Let's go down to a next challenge exercise here. 3.2.3. Write one statement. Okay, so we're writing one line. What line? Declares an integer variable num houses initialized to 25. So if you've read the previous section here or read the stuff above this, you know that to declare an integer, you start by typing int, and then you put the name. The name is supposed to be num houses, so I type num houses. Make sure you get the capitalization right to match what you have down here. And then it says initialized to 25. So what you can do is you can just put a space and then equals 25. Now it is possible to do this on 2 lines, but it specifically said one statement here. So I'll follow the directions. If you're interested, it'll actually accept it no matter how you do it, as long as your answer is right. But it said one statement, so I wrote one statement. Cool. So that's it. So it printed out 25 because after we made this variable and set it equal to 25, we printed it out, and it's 25. Okay. Now I'll do a couple of these just to make a point here, which is this. When you see this kind of statement, num apples equals num apples plus 3, you need to understand that what this is doing. Like, you shouldn't have to think about it after a little while. You should look at this and understand that what it's doing is adding 3 to num apples. Okay. So I'm going to explain a little bit over here. So this adds 3 to num apples. And here's the statement, right? Why? Well, think about this. Consider these lines. It says num apples is initially 5. So suppose, like, look at this code. Let's say I say num apples. Let's get rid of this. Um, let's say I have num apples equals 5. Okay. So we're starting out with a 5. And then we put this line, num apples equals num apples plus 3. Remember how evaluation goes. So remember, which you have been taught this at this point, right? That the way assignment works is the right side, the num apples plus 3, 3 is evaluated. Okay. In this case, if you had num apples equals 5 and then you evaluate num apples plus 3, you're going to put a 5 in for num apples, right? And you're going to get 5 plus 3 is 8. So it's going to evaluate to 8. Okay. And then the next step, so this is like step 1 here. Step 1, the right side is evaluated and you get 8. The second thing that happens is that the result is assigned to the variable on the left. Right? So in this case, we're going to assign an 8 to num apples. So num apples ends up 8 as 8. Okay. So when you see this statement, num apples equals num apples plus 3, you need to understand that we're adding 3 to whatever the previous value of num apples is. So when they say num apples is initially 5, and then this line that's highlighted adds 3, we should end up with 8. Okay. Same thing here. It's just a little bit more complicated to keep track of. So num apples is 5. So when you run this line, now num fruit is also 5, right? Because we're going to put a 5 in for num apples and assign the result to num fruit. So now num fruit is 5. And then this line, the last line, you should recognize as adding 1. So if num fruit was 5 and we add 1, then we'll end up with 6, which is correct. All right. Write a statement ending with -1 that decreases the value of a variable fly count by 1. So, when it's a +1, right, that means add 1. And when it's a +3, that means add 3. So if we're subtracting 1, it would look similar, but it would be fly count equals fly count -1, right? So this line would subtract 1 from whatever the previous value is. Yeah, we get it right. Okay. So new challenge activity 3.2.4, write a statement that increases num people by 5. Okay, so I'm not going to think too hard about this. Just going to write it. Assuming, do I have to click start? No. So num people equals num people plus what? How many people are we increasing it by? It says by 5. So add 5. And I'll run it and we will get it right. Now, since we're doing this right now, it helps to explain this. I'll look at VS Code, which is, right here again, just to illustrate something, right? So I'll use like number as my variable. So let's say, or let's just use num because it's faster to type. So num equals num plus, let's say 2. We know what that does, right? Adds 2 to num. Okay. But that's not the only way to add 2 to num. Another way is this shorthand notation, plus equals 2. This also adds 2 to num. Okay. It's just a shorthand way. So what I typed on line 4 is the equivalent to what I typed on line 2. And you can do that for multiplication, division, subtraction, whatever. So similarly, um, if I did this, num equals num minus, I'll put 7, because why not? Right? That's going to subtract 7, right? Subtract 7 from num. But another way to do that would be num minus equals 7, like that. That also subtracts 7 from num. Okay. So like plus equals will add, minus equals will subtract. And there you can also extend that to multiplication and division. So num equals num, let's say times 3 or 3, right? That's going to multiply number by 3. That multiplies num by 3. Another way to do that would be num times equals 3. That also multiplies num by 3. So you always have choices about how you type these in, is what I'm saying. So on this one right here that I just did, num people equals num people plus 5, and I ran that and we got it right. But I can go back here and I could have used this syntax, plus equals 5. And if I run this, I'll get it right again. Okay, so just be aware that that happens. And I think they teach you it in like the next section though. Okay, let's just go down to these. Oh, there's 4 of them. Let's do a couple. Let's do number 2 because it looks like I did 1 and 3 already. So let's click 2. So when I'm looking at an exercise like this, so this is 3.2.5, number 2, although yours will be different. How does it work? So some of this has been done already and some of it we have to do. So I always read a little bit of the instructions and then look down here to see what they're talking about. So this starts out with integers, num chairs, and num tables are read from input, right? So sometimes people get like nervous, they see that and they go, oh, I need to do that. Do you? Right? No, you don't, because it says integers, num chairs, and num tables are read from input. And if I actually look down and read this code, I can see that actually on line 10 and 11, they've already done that, right? They're not telling me to read these variables from input. They're telling me they did read them from input. So this part is already done, okay? Integers, num chairs, and num tables are read from input. That's already done on line 10 and 11. Now keep reading and we'll find what we're supposed to do. So we keep reading and we get to this line, and this one says assign integer variable total furniture with the total number of furniture, chairs, and tables. So what they want us to do here is assign the variable total furniture, which is written several places. So it's written here. Also, it's here, right? So you can look at it while you type it to get it right. Or in my case, I'm lazy, so I copy paste it. And what do we want to assign it with? With the total number of furniture, chairs, and tables. So we're supposed to add the number of chairs and tables. So that's num chairs plus num tables, semicolon, right? So you need to read what it says up here and implement that in a line down here, and we can click check and we should get it right. And we did. Let's jump to the last one. So we're on number 4 now. Again, I kind of skip up and down as I'm trying to verify what's happened and what needs to happen. So this says integer, wow. So we're on 3.2.5, by the way. Integer num laptops is read from input. Do we see that? Yeah, right there. The computer lab then receives 4 additional laptops. So that's not code, right? It just is telling us the computer lab receives 4 laptops. Then it says the next day the computer lab receives enough desktops such that they have the same number of laptops and desktops. Okay, so what we're supposed to do here, it says write statements to update num laptops and num desktops, and then assign total computers with the total number of laptops and desktops. Okay, so it's a little bit complicated here. This one's hard to kind of understand. So let's take it step by step. So line 10 gives us a number of laptops, okay? That's already been done. But then the next thing it says is the computer lab receives 4 additional laptops. So I think what they want us to do is add 4 to the number of laptops. Okay. So what would that look like? It would be num laptops. I'll use this syntax plus equals 4, right? That's going to be 4 extra laptops. Okay. So I did this line. What we have next is computer lab receives enough desktops so that they have same number of laptops and desktops. So what we need is the number of desktops, so num desktops. We're supposed to have the same number of laptops and desktops. So the number of desktops should be equal to the number of laptops, right? So that's gonna like make num desktops the same as num laptops. Sounds like what they mean when they say this, right? Same number of laptops and desktops. So we did these two things here. Write statements to update num laptops and num desktops. That's what I just did. The last thing is assign total computers with the total number of laptops and desktops. So we need to add these together to get the total computers, right? I think we just need to add the number of laptops and the number of desktops. Now, if you get it wrong the first time, as long as your code runs, you'll be able to see what you got and what you were supposed to get. So like my code doesn't run here. Why not? Let's see. Cannot find symbol. Total computers equals num laptops plus num desktops. But if I look at what it's complaining about, it thinks the error is right here. But looking around this area, I see that what happened was I did not spell laptops correctly, right? I wrote laptops. I'm missing a P. So I'll put that in, try it again. And it worked this time. And so if I was wrong, then what we would see is that like what my output and their output doesn't match. But since we did it right, everything is looking good. Now we talked about identifiers in the last video, I believe. And so just briefly here, the rules, um, well, I won't list the rules. You can read them, but I'll explain all of these. So, which are valid identifiers? Identifiers are variable names and other types of names that you decide. So, could you name something num cars? Yes. Could you name something num cars 1? Yes. It's not a very good name, but you could do that. Could you name something underscore num cars? Yes. Underscores are allowed. Could you name something underscore underscore num cars? Yes. Again, these aren't great names, but you could do it. Could you name something third place? No. You are not allowed to start a variable name with a number. So that's listed up above. Can't start a number, you can't start a variable name with a number. So that's invalid. Could you name something third place? Yes. Could you name something third place with an exclamation point? No. You cannot use exclamation points in variable names because the exclamation point already has another meaning in Java. So we can't just include them because it'll confuse the compiler. So that is not valid. Can we name a variable short? No. We're not allowed to name variables with names that are already something in Java, and short is already something in Java. We'll have a list down below, but this is not allowed. Could you name a variable very tall? No, you're not allowed to have spaces in names. Okay. Now, having said all that, if we scroll down a little bit, like these are the words you're not allowed to use. So you'll find if you look at this list, you'll find that short is on the list. Couldn't have something called short. Any type you can't have. So you can't have something called short. You can't have something called int. You can't have something called double, right? Because these already have meanings. And a lot of other words too that have, meanings in Java that we haven't covered yet, but still we're not allowed to use the words. All right. Arithmetic expressions. So this is teaching us stuff that we kind of already know, right? Add, subtract, multiply, divide. Okay. Are these valid? X plus 1? Sure, you can type that in Java, right? Could you type 2 times? Remember, asterisk is times. 2 times x minus y? That's fine. Could you type just an x by itself? Sure. Could you type a 2 by itself? Why not? Could you type 2x? No, right? 2x in math is 2 times x, but you have to actually include the asterisk for multiplication if you want to multiply things. You can't just write them next to each other. So you can't just write 2x like that. Okay? That's not valid. Could you write 2 plus xy? No. Well, technically yes. If your variable is named xy, then this is just one thing in here and then it's allowed. But if this means x times y, then you're not allowed. And this does mean x times y because they told us specifically here these are the only variables are x and y. So this is not allowed. You would have to put the asterisk between the x and the y to make it real multiplication. Could you do x minus minus 2? Yeah. Minus a minus is a plus. Okay. If you want 6 plus num items, would you type 6 plus num items? Yeah. If you want 6 times num items, would you type 6x num items? No, right? It's not x, it's asterisk. So this is wrong. Is this how you would write tote days divided by 12? Yeah. How would you do 5 times I? Not like this, right? You need the asterisk. Is this how you do a negative? Yep. Is this how you do a factorial? No. Also, there's a good chance you don't know what a factorial is if you're in this class. Um, but it's a math thing. It doesn't really matter what it is. In math, you would write it in with an exclamation point. But again, in Java, you can't just use exclamation points wherever you want because they have a special meaning in Java. So this is wrong, but also you don't really need to know what a factorial is right now. So don't worry about it too much. But this is wrong. All right. This is order of operations. Um, so this is the normal math rules for order of operations, pretty much. The only thing that's special is unary minus, and I'll show you an example of that in a minute, so I'm not going to do it right now. So down here, what they're asking you is what happens first, right? So if you look at this one, x plus 2 times z, you should know from math that multiplication happens before addition and subtraction, right? So in this case, the part that I've highlighted, the 2 times z happens first, which means this line here is the same as this one, right? Because the 2 times z would happen first. So there you go. Now, what about this? We got z over 2, and we also have a minus x. And so what happens first? The z over 2, right? Multiplication and division happen before subtraction. So the part I highlighted was first, and this top one is the correct, means the same thing. Okay. Now what about this? X times Y times Z. We're multiplying them and we're multiplying them. So what happens first? Well, when you have things that are equal priority, then generally you just assume that they happen left to right. So this multiplication will happen first, and this will be the right answer. All right. Here we have addition, but then we have multiplication and we have division. So what happens first? Well, as we just mentioned, when you have the same priority, then they happen left to right. And multiplication and division are the same priority. So the addition happens last, but the part that I've highlighted just happens left to right, which means the first thing that happens is the 1 times y. So we should be looking for the 1 times y in parentheses, which we see right here. All right, finally here you have x over 2 plus y over 2. And we know that multiplication and division have higher priority than addition. So x over 2 should be in parentheses, and y over 2 should also be in parentheses. And that's the last one. Okay. Now let's just try to figure this out. What is tote count after executing the following? So the number of items is 5. And if you put a 5 in here, then we should just work this out from the inside out. So if you put a 5 in here, then the parentheses will be 2 times 5, right? The part that I've highlighted. Put in the 5, and you'll have 2 times 5, which is 10. Then you take that 10, multiply it by 4, and we get 40. And the last thing will be adding the 1. So we should have 41. Okay. All right. We'll do these from scratch, actually. These are quick. So this is just asking us what happens first. So There's division and subtraction. What happens first? Division. Easy. Next. Now here we have multiplication, addition, and also there's this little minus here. And so this is what I was saying when I said that we'll come back to unary subtraction. So this is not subtraction actually, right? What this is this minus is just attached to the n. So it's a negative n. It's not really like we're not saying to subtract n. We're saying it's the negative of n, right? And that's what we mean when we say unary minus and says minus used for negation. And where that comes is after parentheses, but before you get to multiplication. So actually down here, when we're looking at wherever we were, there's three things here: the multiplication, the negative, and the plus. And it turns out that this negative actually is more, it happens before the multiplication. And that's just from our chart. So this is just the minus sign. See, got it right. Next, what happens first? Multiplication or division? They're equal priority, and so they happen left to right. So the multiplication is first. What about here? Well, parentheses happens first. So the part that I've highlighted has the multiplication. So that's first. Okay, lot here. We got a negative, we've got a plus, we got division. What happens first? Well, parentheses, right? So the part that I've highlighted has to happen first, which means we're going to do that plus first. And then after we do that, now we have negative subtraction and we have division. Well, division happens before subtraction. So division is next. Then the negative must be last. Now be careful here, right? This negative is not the same as the negative we just saw in the previous problem because this is not a negative attached to a variable. This is a minus something complicated. Okay, so this is regular subtraction. It's not just a negative sign. So it'll end up last here. And we got them. All right. Um, this is participation, so we don't really need to do it, but might as well. So consider the example above. Whoa, maybe, oh, that sucks. What are we doing? How to use this tool? What? A website lists the calories expended by men and women during exercise as follows. Okay. Below are those expressions using programming. Okay. Oh, okay. So what do you have to do? So like this is like from a website and they're saying this is in Java down here, or not just Java, just programming, they say. So what did they do? Okay. So we're just identifying what they had to do. So the first thing they had to do was something was replaced by parentheses. And so if you look at this carefully, you'll see that here they have like some square brackets, but down here we have parentheses and parentheses, right? We don't use square brackets the same way in Java. So the first thing that happened was they took these square brackets and they replaced them by parentheses. Okay. Now something became single words. What? So looking here, if you're careful, notice that something like heart rate, you can't use heart rate as a variable name, right? Because it has a space in it. So you have to replace heart rate with something else like heart BPM. So you have to get rid of those spaces. So multi-word terms with spaces need to be replaced with single words. So they did that. Um, and then finally, I think these are going to be obvious, but like minus signs became minus signs. Um, Now, this is actually kind of important for copy pasting. So this symbol here looks like a minus sign, but it's not the same as this minus sign, is it? Can you see that they're different sizes? So this one right here is not like the same minus sign we use in Java. This one down here is the minus sign we use in Java. And if you copy paste this into Java, it'll probably look right to you, but your program will fail and you won't know why. So be careful. Like it's kind of a look-alike. It looks like a minus sign, but it's not a minus sign. It's just a different kind of dash. So replace the dash with a minus sign is what they're saying. And then lastly, um, the X symbol is not for multiplication in Java, right? So you have to change the X. If you see time symbol, you need to replace the time symbol with the asterisk. All right. Arithmetic. Let's just scroll a little bit through here and see what we have. So this is teaching us the thing that I already have mentioned. So if num atoms is 7, what happens with this? So you have to understand this notation, right? So plus equals means add 5. So if you add 5 to 7, you're going to get 12. What if you did num atoms times equals 2? Well, that would multiply by 2. Could you do the same thing with car count equals car count over 2? Yeah, it would look like this. Car count slash equals 2, right? So they're teaching you the equivalent notation here, or they're trying to. Num items equals box count plus 1. Not possible, right? Now be careful here, right? The whole point is this. Car count equals car count over 2. That divides the value by 2 of car count. That's in order for that to make sense like that, it needs to be the same variable on both sides, right? Then it can be replaced like this. This one does not take box count and add 1. It does not take num items and add 1. It kind of does a combination, right? It takes the box count, it adds 1, and it assigns the result to a different variable, num items. This is not the same as like this one, right? When the variable is the same on both sides, then you can use this notation. When it's different, you can't. So this is not possible. So we'll just copy paste, not possible. And they will explain what I just explained there. Okay. Um, Another thing is you can't use commas, right? So this right here, this value, um, it's 2 billion something, right? But you're not allowed to do it in Java. I'm going to go to JDoodle. Now that I have this, I can go here, open my project. Let's do this one. Click here. So here's just a blank project. So if I tried to put a number here that has like commas, right? Like I do 2,125. I'm gonna do more. I'm gonna do 2 million, right? Like this. This is an error. You can't use commas this way. So if I try to run it, it doesn't run. I get an error. Also, let me try to print this just to show you system.out.print X. So this still doesn't run. So it doesn't run. Same error. But what you can do, you're not allowed to use commas, but what you can do actually is if you want to like visually separate this so you can tell how many, like, are you typing 2 million or are you typing 200,000, right? If you need to visually do that, you can actually use underscores like this. to help you visualize that this is 2,125,612. And if I execute this, you'll see that it works. You'll see, right? It printed out the number, which means that the number, obviously the code compiled and ran. So you can use underscores to help you visually separate the number, but that's just for yourself, right? For you to type in, make it easier to type in. All right, back here. So you can't do this. Is the following an error? Yeah, commas are not allowed. I guess I did a couple of these in the previous class. I mean, not for you, but for myself. Let's do number 2. Let's look at it. Type the program's output. This is a little bit sneaky. Not sneaky. It's just a lot of like you have to think about the variables, right? So let me just delete all this. So think about we have X, Y. Well, we have Y. Let me type a Y or I'm going to kill you. Okay. Maybe the threat was unnecessary, but you know. All right. So we have X, Y, Z. Then we have X equals 7. So X, put in a 7. X or Y equals 6. So I'll put in a 6. And then we have Z equals, oh God, what? Y. Okay. So we have all this. But remember that the way this works is you have to evaluate the entire right-hand side. So if I'm trying to do this kind of, I won't say mentally, but I'll just work it out here. Like we have an X, right? What's X? 7, right? So you can take that 7 for X and put it in here. And then I see a Y. What's Y? Well, I see over here it's a 6. So I'll put a 6 in here. And now this I can try to figure out what's going on. So this is just me working it out. So if you are working this out, the first thing you would do is that you have 7 plus 3, right? 7 plus 3 is 10. So I'll get rid of the 7 plus 3 and replace it with 10. Okay. Now I've got parentheses here. 4 minus 10. What's 4 minus 10? 4 minus 10 is negative 6. So I'll get negative 6. Okay. Now I have negative 6 minus 6. What's negative 6 minus 6? It is negative 12. So that's how I'll work it out. I get negative 12 here, and then I see system.out print line Z, but Z is negative 12. So it should be negative 12. And then because this is a print ln, I have to remember to press enter at the end. Check. So they just did what I did. Now, I'm not saying you should do this, but what I am saying is you can do this. I made this too big here. So I'll go to like start coding and I'll click open my project. I'll go back to the one I was just doing again. One sneaky thing you can, one sneaky thing you can do here is when you have a problem like this in zyBooks, if it's confusing to you, you can just take the inside, don't take the whole thing or it won't compile. But if you just take the inside of your main method, copy that, and we put it inside of our main method and run it, you can see exactly what it's going to print without thinking, right? I'm not saying you should do that, right? Because you should be able to think your way through this, but still. So like if I go to number 4, which, right, this is the hardest one, right? Again, I could take the inside here and I could put it in here and I can run it. And it's 3, 2, and then next line. So the answer here is 3, 2, and then next line. And I got it. Now, having said that, I'm still going to work this out though. Okay. So I can do that, but I could also just work it out. So if I'm trying to do this and work it out for myself, I'm looking at the code here. I'm just trying to zoom in. So I'm looking at the code here. So variables x and y, variables x and y. X is 5, so I go x 5. Y is 9, so I go y is 9. X plus equals, uh-oh, right? This is a little bit complicated. So I have to think about this and do it step by step for myself. So I'm going to come down here. So we have x equals plus equals 7 minus y. So mentally, I'm going to take the 9 for y and put it in here for y. Oops, I typed a 0. It should have been 9. Now you have 7 minus 9. What is 7 minus 9? Negative 2, right? Negative 2. But then this is x plus equals negative 2. When you say plus equals, you mean add it to x. So when you say x plus equals negative 2, that means I need to add negative 2 to x. But if you add negative 2 to x, it's going to go down by 2. So instead of 5, it's going to be a 3. Okay. So this whole line here is complicated to work out, but the end result is that x equals 3. Then finally you have y equals 2. So you go y equals 2. And then lastly, we print out system.out println. I can't really do it again, but system.out println x. So it prints the x, which is 3. 3. And then after the 3, you go down to the next line because it's a print line. And then you have system.out println y. Y is 2. So you print the 2, and you need to remember to hit enter to go down to the next line. That's why there's a blank line down here. And then you hit check, and it would be correct. Okay. Let's do this last one, and then we're going to be done. Yeah. So again, keep track of what you have to do and what they've done for you when you're doing these. So I click start. Integer, side A, side B, side C are read from input. Are they? Yeah, right here, right? 11, 12, and 13 are going to do what that says. Then it says representing the lengths of sides of the triangle. Okay. What we have to do is this. Assign triperimeter with the perimeter of a triangle. So the perimeter means the distance around. So we need to just add those together. Okay. So it says assign triperimeter. So that's triperimeter. I can copy paste it from up here to make sure I spell it right, but triperimeter. And perimeter is the distance around, so it's the sum of all the sides. So it's side A plus side B plus side C. And that's it. And in their example, 23 and 14, 20 plus 3 plus 14 must add up to 37. But we're not asked to print it out because they printed it out. We just needed to do what it said, which was assign triperimeter with triperimeter with the perimeter of the triangle. So just add up the sides. And we got it. Let's do the next one. Assume eagles weigh 11 pounds. Vultures weigh 13 pounds. Okay. Eagles are 11, vultures are 13. You might have something different. Given variables num eagles and num vultures. Okay, I see them there. Read from input. Yeah, there they are. Compute the average weight of all the eagles and vultures. Okay. So you have to use your knowledge of like stuff before this class, right? we didn't teach you what an average is in here, but you're supposed to understand how to compute an average, right? So like this is just an example. Example. Suppose we had, let's say, four eagles and let's say uh two vultures, okay? This is just an example. What would the average weight be? Like uh what is average weight? Well, what you have to do to get the average weight is it's going to be the total weight. So the average weight is going to be the total weight, and then you want to divide by the number of like birds or whatever, right? That's how you would do it. Now, I made up variable names here, but if you were trying to calculate the average weight of the birds, it would be the total weight divided by how many birds you had. Okay. And so we have to do the equivalent of that here. So the first thing we need to figure out is what is the total weight. But the total weight, like the way you would calculate it, is the total weight. And again, these are the wrong variable names, but the total weight would be if you had four eagles, but an eagle weighs 11 pounds. So you'd have to take the four eagles and you'd have to multiply it by 11 pounds to get the weight of the eagles. And then we have two vultures. So we would have to take the two and times it by how many, like how much a vulture weighs. So a vulture weighs 13 pounds. So we'd have to multiply it by 13. And then this is just math that would have to be done. So like 4 times 11 is 44. 2 times 13 is 26. So it'd be 44 plus 26, which might be 70, but that's, my math could be wrong. And then that 70 would come in here, right? So the average weight would be 70. Sorry, the total weight would be 70. And then the total number of birds would be the 4 plus 6, right? So 4 plus 2, which would be 6. So I'm just kind of scribbling here, but this is the logic. We need to weigh all the birds together, and we also need to know how many birds there are. Okay. So with that in mind, come back to the problem. Um, so we have a number of eagles and a number of vultures. And what do we do next? Well, we need to know how much they weigh, right? Here I wrote total weight. Well, here I look at my variables just to see what they gave us, and I see that they have a variable called sum weight. So let's use that as our total weight. Sum weight equals. Now we need to add up the weight of all the eagles and vultures. So just like before, if there were like, four eagles, we need to multiply the 4 times 11, right? Because an eagle weighs 11 pounds. But we don't know how many eagles there are. They're in a variable. So the weight is going to be 11 pounds times how many eagles there are. But how many eagles is stored in a variable num eagles? So this is how much the eagles weigh together. 11 pounds times however many of them there are. But then we have the other bird, vultures. How many vultures are there? There's num vultures. How much do they weigh? 13 pounds. So we have to take the 13 pounds for a vulture and multiply that by how many vultures there are, which is num vultures. Okay, so this is going to be our total weight of all birds. Okay. Now, once we have the total weight of all the birds, we need to divide by how many birds there are. So the average weight, which is here, your average weight is going to be the total weight, which we called sum weight, and we need to divide it by the number of birds. But I don't have a variable for number of birds, so I'm going to have to add up the number of eagles and the number of vultures. Num eagles plus num vultures and do that in parentheses. Okay. Now, as I was doing this, I realized I didn't see this at first, but they wrote in that the eagles weigh 11 pounds and the vultures weigh 13 pounds. So if you want to, like this should be fine, but if you want to, you can get rid of the 11 down here and you can replace it with eagle pounds. Can't type. And the same thing with the 13. The 13 was how much a vulture weighed, but there's vulture pounds as well. So you could replace the 13 with vulture pounds. So then the weight is eagle pounds times the number of eagles plus vulture pounds times the number of vultures. It's the same as if you just type in the numbers though. Okay, so you have to calculate the total weight and then divide the total weight by the number of birds. And, if you get a different one, but you want this one, you can refresh the problem. And if you do that a couple times, you might be able to get the same question as me. All right. So that was plenty. I'm not going to do 3-6 in this video because we're out of time, but hopefully this was somewhat useful to you. So I'm going to stop it here and see you next week, I suppose. That's it for now.